All right, today we are diving into one of the most powerful, mind-bending arguments ever written, the ancient letter to the Colossians. It was written to solve a really specific spiritual crisis, but the solution it offers? Well, it's nothing short of cosmic.
So let me ask you this. Imagine your community is just being pulled in a dozen different spiritual directions all at once. How do you find any clarity in that? Do you try to fight every single battle, debunk every little idea? Or is there a better way? This was the exact problem facing this small community in the ancient city of Colossae.
You see, the believers there were being tempted by what you could almost call a spiritual buffet. This new philosophy was spreading, and it offered a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and on the surface it seemed really deep and sophisticated, but in reality it was just creating this massive confusion.
And what's wild is just the mix of ideas they were dealing with. You had these Jewish mystical traditions all blended up with some really harsh self-denial practices. People were being told they had to worship angels and chase after some secret knowledge. And it was all based on this idea that you needed to go through these powerful cosmic intermediaries, kind of like spiritual gatekeepers, just to get to God. It was this really complex, really intimidating system.
So faced with this spiritual mashup, the Apostle Paul, who wrote the letter, does something brilliant. He doesn't get bogged down in the weeds. He doesn't try to debunk every single point. No, he does something way more radical. He decides to change the entire conversation. And this shows his strategy perfectly. The obvious way to respond is to play defense, right? To argue against every false idea one by one. But Paul's way is totally different. He goes on offense. He unveils one single truth, so massive, so all-encompassing, that all those other little ideas, they just collapse. They become totally irrelevant.
And what is that one vast truth? It's the absolute total supremacy of Christ. Paul's strategy is to basically hit the zoom out button, way out, to a cosmic scale to show that Christ isn't just another spiritual option on the buffet. He is the center of reality itself.
This is the opening shot of his argument, and wow, it is staggering. He says Jesus is the perfect visible image of the invisible God. And that term, firstborn, it's not about time, it's a title of rank, of inheritance. It means he is the supreme heir over everything that exists, period.
Paul then builds his entire case on these four cosmic pillars. First, Christ isn't just in creation, he is the agent of creation. Second, he's not just powerful, he's the very force holding the entire universe together right now. Third, he's the source of a whole new humanity. And finally, he is the one who will restore and put the entire broken cosmos back together again.
So, this is the crucial point. What about all those cosmic intermediaries and angels the Colossians were so worried about? Paul's answer couldn't be clearer. Thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, whatever name you want to give these invisible powers, they were all created by Christ and they are all subject to him. He is their Lord.
And this brings us to the cross. Now for Paul, the cross wasn't just about forgiving our individual sins. It was a public cosmic victory. He paints this picture of it being like a Roman victory parade, where God publicly disarmed and triumphed over all those rebellious spiritual powers, showing just how powerless they really were.
Okay, so that is the massive cosmic picture. But what in the world does that mean for a regular person living in Colossae? Well, it means a complete and total change in identity, a shift from being an alienated outsider to being a full-fledged member of God's family.
Paul first reminds them of their before picture. He says, look, you were separated from God, and not just by distance, but by a mindset that was actually hostile to him. You were, for all intents and purposes, spiritual exiles.
And then boom, he immediately pivots to the after. But now, because of Christ, that alienation is over. You've been brought near, you've been reconciled, and you're presented as holy, set apart, right there in God's presence. The transformation is absolute.
Now, this is so cool. The title Paul uses here, Holy Ones, that was a term originally used for the angels in God's heavenly council. So by applying it to these everyday people, Paul is giving them this incredible new status. They are now God's official representatives on earth, inheriting a role once held by angels.
So if you believe this giant cosmic story, and if you truly have this new identity, it has to change how you live, right? A cosmic vision has to have down-to-earth consequences. Paul is basically saying your ethics just flow out of your new identity. You act differently because you are different.
He uses this really powerful metaphor of changing clothes. First, he says you have to put off, you got to take off the old wardrobe. These are the behaviors that belong to that old, broken way of being human. Things like anger, slander, deceit, and greed, which he even calls a form of idolatry.
And then you have to put on the new set of clothes. These are the virtues that perfectly reflect the character of Christ himself. Compassion, kindness, humility. This is the new uniform for members of God's new humanity.
And this new reality, it reshapes everything, even the rigid Roman social structures of the day. The typical household, with its strict hierarchies, gets completely reordered. Because if Christ is the true Lord over all, then every single earthly relationship, husband and wife, parent and child, even master and slave, is now redefined by one thing: mutual service to him.
And this all brings us to the grand conclusion, the mic drop moment of the entire argument. Christ isn't just an important figure or a central belief for Christians. He is the gravitational center of the entire universe. Everything, every star, every philosophy, every person finds its ultimate purpose and its meaning in him.
And that leaves us with this one profound final question. Forget all the lesser ideas, forget all the spiritual confusion. What truly changes in your life, in your ethics, in your hope, if you believe that one person is the gravitational force holding all of reality together? That is the radical vision of Colossians.